The wedding of my dreams turned into a nightmare, a story of cheating and heartbreak. I never thought I'd be that person, the bridezilla, the one who obsesses over every tiny detail, flips out over the smallest imperfections, and thinks the world revolves around her for one special day. But when I met David, I knew I wanted our wedding to be the most fantastic day of my life. And honestly, I went into it believing it would be our day, the day where we'd both be the centre of attention, surrounded by love and joy. However, I quickly learned that my definition of the perfect wedding differed significantly from David's. What started as a dream wedding spiraled into something far darker, something that ultimately led me to a heartbreak I could never have imagined. David and I met 3 years ago. He was charming, funny, and most importantly, successful. I fell for him hard. He was everything I had always wanted in a partner, attractive, intelligent, and driven. But as we got more serious, I realised that I wasn't the only one who wanted to plan for our future. David, while sweet and attentive, was less concerned with the details of the wedding and more focused on the long-term picture. He was a low-key guy who preferred a quiet life. This became our first real disagreement. When David proposed at an expensive 5-star restaurant in the city, I was ecstatic. But that's when the fight over the wedding began. I had always dreamed of a lavish wedding, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. The dress, the venue, the flowers, the food, I wanted it all, and I wanted it all to be perfect. David, on the other hand, kept suggesting more practical ideas. "We don't need to go overboard," he said. "Let's keep it simple, intimate. You don't need a $10,000 dress or a $50,000 venue." But that didn't fit my vision. I had always imagined a wedding that would leave people speechless, and I wasn't going to settle for less than that. After weeks of arguing, I wore David down. He agreed to the extravagant wedding, though he wasn't exactly thrilled about it. He reluctantly helped pick out the venue, the catering, and the photographer. But deep down, I knew he wasn't enjoying the process. Still, he supported me in his own way, even if it was clear that he'd rather be doing something else. As the wedding day approached, I found myself becoming more and more stressed. I was obsessed with making everything perfect. If the flowers weren't exactly the shade of blush I had picked out, I would have a meltdown. If the seating chart was off by even a single name, I'd lose it. People started calling me a bridezilla, and while it stung, I justified it by telling myself that it was all for the perfect wedding. The day of the wedding was everything I had dreamed of. The ceremony took place at a lavish estate with sweeping views of the city. I wore a custom-made gown that cost more than my first car, and the venue was adorned with hundreds of roses, lilies, and orchids. My bridesmaids looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, and the guests were all dressed in their finest attire. The entire event was a spectacle. David looked handsome, of course. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair slicked back. But as the ceremony went on, I couldn't help but notice that he seemed distant. He wasn't as engaged in the vows as I had imagined, his eyes wandering and his smile appearing a bit forced. I brushed it off at the time. Maybe he was just nervous. The reception was nothing short of a fairy tale. The food was exquisite, the music was perfect, and we danced the night away. But as the evening wore on, David became more withdrawn. He wasn't his usual self. He wasn't his usual flirtatious, affectionate self, which I chalked up to wedding fatigue. I brushed it off, thinking that he was just overwhelmed by the amount of attention we were receiving. The following morning, David and I boarded a private jet for our honeymoon in the Maldives. The whole trip was a dream come true. The white sand beaches, the crystal clear water, the luxury villa. It was everything I could have imagined. But something still didn't feel right. David was distant, and every attempt I made to get close to him seemed to fall flat. I tried to shake it off. After all, it had been a stressful few months of wedding planning. Maybe he just needed some space. But as the days went on, his behaviour only got worse. I couldn't help but feel that he was avoiding me. I tried not to be paranoid, but I had a sinking feeling in my gut. On the 4th night of our honeymoon, I decided to confront him. We had a quiet dinner on the beach, and I tried to bring up his recent behaviour. "David, is everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "You've been so distant. Is there something wrong?" David looked at me, almost annoyed. "I'm fine," he said curtly, pushing his plate aside. "I just need some space, okay? This wedding stuff, it's a lot for me." I was taken aback by his response. "We're supposed to be enjoying our honeymoon," I said, trying to hold back the tears. "This is supposed to be our time to connect. Don't you want that?" David just sighed and stood up, walking away from the table without another word. I sat there alone on the beach, feeling like everything I had worked so hard for was slipping away. The next morning, everything came crashing down. As I woke up and walked out onto our villa's terrace to grab some coffee, I noticed David's phone sitting on the table. But that morning, something inside me urged me to check it. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I grabbed the phone, unlocking it with the code I knew by heart. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through his messages. That's when I saw it. A message from a woman named Chloe. It was dated the night before and after dinner, and the text was explicit. "I miss you already. You were amazing last night. I can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped. I read it over and over, hoping that I had misinterpreted it, hoping that it was some kind of mistake. But it was clear. David had cheated on me, on our honeymoon, after we had just gotten married. I was shaking. I felt sick to my stomach, and my world came crashing down around me. All of the love, the commitment, the dreams I had for our future, all shattered in an instant. I confronted David that afternoon, after he returned from a walk. He looked guilty the moment he saw my face, and I didn't waste any time. "Who is Chloe?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He froze, his face going pale. "Look, it's not what you think." "No," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Don't lie to me. I saw the messages. I know what you did. You cheated on me, on our honeymoon. After everything we've been through, this is how you repay me?" David stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I wasn't having it. "You think I didn't notice you pulling away during the wedding? Do you think I didn't see how uninterested you were in me? You were already checked out, weren't you? You couldn't wait to be with someone else." "I'm sorry," he said weakly, his face pale and guilt-ridden. "I don't know what happened. It was a mistake. I never meant to hurt you." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "You went behind my back and slept with someone else, and now you're telling me it was a mistake?" I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. The man I had married, the man I had built my dream wedding for, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I didn't know who this person was anymore. I spent the rest of the honeymoon in a fog. David tried to apologize, but there was no way I could forgive him. I couldn't stop thinking about everything, the wedding, the promises, the future we had planned. It was all a lie. When we returned home, I moved out of our shared apartment. David begged me to stay, to work through it, but I couldn't. I realized that this wasn't the man I thought I had married. The man I had planned a perfect wedding for wasn't even the man I thought he was. I filed for divorce a few months later, and while I'm still recovering from the heartbreak, I know that I deserve better than someone who would betray me like that. I learned a hard lesson, one that no amount of wedding planning could have prepared me for. Sometimes, no matter how much you plan for something, life has a way of throwing you a curveball. And that honeymoon wasn't the beginning of our happily ever after. It was the end of a dream I was too blinded by perfection to see wasn't real.